Well, the breaking news of the night is that Donald Trump has lost another very important vote. That makes 2 nights in a row of breaking news about Donald Trump being on the losing side of a very important vote. Last night, the voters of Wisconsin crushed Donald Trump and Elon Musk's candidate for a state Supreme Court justice and instead elected the candidate supported by the Democratic Party in Wisconsin, Susan Crawford, to be the next elected Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin. But tonight, the Republican-controlled United States Senate made history by voting against Donald Trump for the first time. Donald Trump lost the vote in the United States Senate tonight. 4 Republican senators joined all the Democrats in voting against Donald Trump tonight in the United States Senate, 51-48, in favor of a resolution that would nullify any claim of presidential authority to impose tariffs on Canada. This is the first big crack in the wall of Republican senatorial support for Donald Trump. Republicans voting against the Trump-Canadian tariffs in the Senate were Senator Mitch McConnell, Senator Susan Collins, Senator Lisa Murkowski, and Senator Rand Paul. Donald Trump began his day with a social media post attacking those 4 senators, and still they defied Donald Trump. Rand Paul said as clearly as I have been saying for years the truth that other Republicans dare not say, that tariffs are taxes on the American people.
Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy.
Donald Trump's secret is out. Tariffs are a tax on American consumers only. Foreign countries don't pay those taxes. Trump supporters wouldn't believe me when I was telling them that for years, but now Republicans are saying it loud and saying it clear. Mitch McConnell said it today. Now the financial networks like CNBC are saying it constantly. And tonight, the Wall Street Journal, in its editorial in response to Donald Trump's announcement of the new tariffs today, said tariffs are taxes, pure and simple. Back in the 20th century, a nerdy right-wing Republican in Washington who never held elected office named Grover Norquist bent the entire Republican Party in Washington to his will. It was pathetic to watch. In effect, he forced them to sign a pledge to never vote for an increase in taxes of any kind. And every single Republican member of the United States Senate signed where Grover Norquist ordered them to sign. Every Republican presidential candidate signed where Grover Norquist required them to sign in order to be Republican candidates. And almost every Republican member of the House of Representatives signed exactly where Grover Norquist ordered them to sign, to never, ever, ever support an increase in taxation of any form. Republicans lived in fear of this guy, that guy right there in the middle. At the time, I declared Grover Norquist to be the most powerful unelected person in Washington because on one issue anyway, he had complete control over one of our political parties. Former Republican presidential campaign manager, my friend Stuart Stevens, wrote a book about the Grover Norquist-controlled Republican Party after Donald Trump was elected president, and he titled that book, "It Was All a Lie." It turns out Grover Norquist was and is a lie. Grover Norquist has revealed himself not to be a principled anti-tax crusader, as has every Republican member of the Senate and House of Representatives, because at some point, every single one of them has supported Donald Trump's increase in taxation on Americans through tariffs, which are sales taxes administered only on goods imported into this country and paid only by Americans in this country. Every one of those Republicans has either actively supported those taxes by Donald Trump or held their cowardly silence about them. And Grover Norquist, the nerd who was once perceived as the toughest Republican operative in Washington, is hiding tonight in his permanent cocoon of cowardly silence about Donald Trump's sales taxes. Donald Trump's tariffs. The last time the gasoline tax was increased in the United States of America was 32 years ago, with only Democratic votes in the House and the Senate. And Grover Norquist was outraged that Democrats, and Democrats only, voted to increase the gasoline tax in America. In 1993, the Democrats voted to increase the gasoline tax by 4.3 cents. And Grover Norquist screamed at the top of his histrionic anti-tax lungs about what a horrible burden an additional 4.3 cents a gallon of gasoline would be in America, what burden it would be for American drivers. And I'll never forget that outrage about the 4.3 cent increase in the gasoline tax, because I was working in the United States Senate at the time as the chief of staff of the Senate Finance Committee, and I personally negotiated that number, 4.3 cents, with the staff of a Democratic senator who was the final holdout on the gas tax increase, the final vote that we needed to get it through the committee. We actually started off by trying to increase it by a dime, but in the desperate last-minute negotiations to get that final vote in the Senate Finance Committee, the most I could get was 4.3 cents, which at the time was roughly a 2% increase in the cost of a gallon of gasoline, 2%. And Grover Norquist went crazy. And every Republican in the Senate and the House, including Mitch McConnell then in the Senate, claimed that the Democrats were crushing the American consumer with that increase in the gasoline tax, 4.3 cents. Newt Gingrich used it in his insurgent campaign to win control of the House of Representatives for Republicans in the next election for the first time in 40 years. And tonight, Newt Gingrich supports 54% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing, and 25% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing, and 10% sales taxes that Donald Trump is imposing on everything the United States of America imports from anywhere in the world. That 4.3 cent increase in the gasoline tax in 1993 was part of a complex deficit reduction legislation bill, huge bill, signed by President Clinton that included spending cuts and tax increases aimed at reducing the deficit, which is exactly what it successfully did. It was at the time the biggest tax increase in history, but that record has been broken. Broken by Donald Trump. Republican Mike Pence, who signed Grover Norquist's anti-tax pledge in order to win his seat in the House of Representatives, tweeted tonight, the Trump tariff tax is the largest peacetime tax hike in U.S. history. These tariffs are nearly 10 times the size of those imposed during the Trump-Pence administration and will cost American families over $3,500 per year. And so tonight, we have a new winner for biggest tax increase in history, Donald Trump and his faithful and mostly cowardly supporters in Congress. As I said, Donald Trump attacked the 4 senators who voted against him tonight in a social media post this morning, saying Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Rand Paul, also of Kentucky, will hopefully get on the Republican bandwagon for a change and fight the Democrats' wild and flagrant push to not penalize Canada. To the people of the great states of Kentucky, Alaska, and Maine, please contact these senators and get them to finally adhere to Republican values and ideals. Senator Collins explained on the Senate floor why the people of Maine did not burn up her office telephones today, demanding a trade war with Canada. Donald Trump, of course, wouldn't have understood everything she said because he, of course, has no idea which country Prince Edward Island is in.
For example, many Maine blueberries are processed in Prince Edward Island. Maine also sends between $200 million and $400 million worth of lobster to Canada each year for processing. There are 240 lobster processing plants in Canada, but only 15 in the United States. I share the president's goal of getting more of that manufacturing done in the state of Maine, done in the United States. But the fact is that if we impose these tariffs on Canadian processing, it's going to be our Maine lobstermen who will bear the cost. It's going to be consumers who bear the cost. The price hikes that will happen for Maine families, every time they go to the grocery store, they fill their gas tank, they fill their heating oil tank. If these tariffs go into effect, will be so harmful. And as price hikes always do, they will hurt those the most who can afford them the least.
The people who can afford them the least. Grover Norquist doesn't care about those people. He never has. Donald Trump doesn't care about those people. He never has, never will. 48 Republican senators do not care about those people. And no Republican members of the House of Representatives care about those people. Not one of them. Everyone who pulls up lobster pots in Maine for a living knows something else Donald Trump doesn't know, which is the biggest foreign customer in the world for Maine lobster is China. And so the people of Maine did not demand that Susan Collins get in line with the madman who wants a trade war with Canada and the world. In the country where Rand Paul grew up and where I grew up and where you grew up, presidents didn't control tariffs. Congress did. A couple of obscure laws passed by Congress decades ago gave the president power to adjust tariffs only in a national emergency, which basically meant something like a world war. Donald Trump's claim of emergency conditions as the legal justification of his tariff orders today is provably false, especially when it comes to as good a neighboring country that exists in the world, Canada. The vote in the Senate was to remove the president's power to declare an emergency involving Canada.
Taxes should not be enacted by one person. So I will vote today to end the emergency. I will vote today to try to reclaim the power of taxation, the power of the tariff, to where the Constitution designated it should properly be, and that is in Congress.
While the Senate was voting tonight against Donald Trump, after-hours trading showed a stock market crash in the making, which will leave Wall Street in fear of tomorrow morning's opening bell. Donald Trump didn't want to see an active, ongoing stock market crash during his announcement today, so he made his announcement after the markets closed on Wall Street. Even before he spoke today, the Wall Street Journal called Donald Trump's plan, quote, the dumbest trade war in history. And after Donald Trump revealed his biggest tax increase in history today, the Wall Street Journal said, quote, tariffs are taxes. Donald Trump's years of lying about foreign countries paying Donald Trump's tariffs have crashed into the brick wall of reality. No foreign country has ever paid a tariff imposed by the United States of America. No country on earth is empowered in any way to impose taxes of any kind on another country. Everyone knows that, except Donald Trump and the supporters who he fooled. The Wall Street Journal said, tariffs are taxes. Car prices will rise by thousands of dollars, including those made in America. In the demented rhetoric unique to Donald Trump, he decided to call today Liberation Day. And it turned out he was right. It was Liberation Day for 4 Republican United States senators who finally summoned the strength to vote against Donald Trump and defeat him in the United States Senate.
I'm joined now by Governor Tim Walz, who's a Democrat of Minnesota. Governor, let me just start with you. Again, we've had you on the program before. Your state has close relationships with your Canadian neighbors. I know that. And you've been sort of sidelining with some of those Canadian leadership about these sort of trade war. What the president announced is almost inconceivable. What does it do to the folks in your state? What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, well, good evening, Chris. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think here in a week or so, I'm going to be up in Toronto meeting with some of the premiers as we talk about this. Look, they are our largest trading partner, followed by Mexico. These are folks that we have had relationships since the founding of Minnesota. It matters greatly. And what we understand is that these are fair trade deals that were negotiated fairly. And the real irony of this is the folks who supported Donald Trump, some of the working folks, the farmers, the miners in northern Minnesota, 650 miners were just laid off in taconite mining. Our farm community is on pins and needles because of these tariffs. And then when you go to war with Canada, whether it's energy or whether it's potash for fertilizer, these are fundamental inputs that are going to already drive up costs on very narrow margins. So yeah, it is almost inconceivable. Look, Chris, I don't know. You almost have to be an amateur psychologist on this. It's like Trump is stuck in the 80s. His music, his clothing, his thinking. He has been on this tariff thing forever, and every economist, conservative or liberal, will tell you they just simply don't work. We use them strategically, but he doesn't fundamentally understand how trade works. It goes back to what I continue to say. I think the biggest myth perpetuated on this country is that Donald Trump understands anything about business. He's bankrupt every single one he's been into, and now he's bankrupting this country. So I appreciate you talking about this. This is a tax on working people that we've not seen in any of our lifetimes, and it is going to have dramatic effect.
You know, there are two follow-ups I want on that. One is, you know, you're in a state, it elected you governor, but you represented a district that actually voted for President Trump in 2016 that had a lot of Republicans when you were in Congress. You've spent a lot of time talking to folks in Minnesota, and again, there's, you know, it's not quite a swing state, but it's close enough. Have you ever encountered in the wild, I mean, really, just like out of the mouth of someone at a doorstep or a diner, like, I hate those Canadians who are ripping us off. We got to get back at them. Have you ever, I'm asking this. Have you ever,
no,
independent of President Trump, encountered that view in the wild?
Never, never. And I think, you know, like, it could be a bit of a stereotype or whatever. I find that it is about as close to any stereotype of being true, the decency of Canadians and the neighborliness and the being there. And I think the thing that irritates me about our allies is, I mentioned this last summer, I was, you know, on the anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and to see those graves while you go to the American cemetery, the French cemetery, Canadians, Australians, all of these people that he says are ripping us off, the Danes, it's an outrageous affront to folks who share our values on democracy, and for him to mock them and to say this about Canada, that they're nasty people. The thing I think that starts to have to set in, and I would argue that what happened in Wisconsin is that there's buyer's remorse on this, and nobody signed up for this. Nobody signed up to insult the Canadians and drive up potash prices. Nobody expected to see tariffs that were just randomly thrown on that are going to punish, especially middle-class Americans. So no, your question is right. But look, I don't think this guy listens to anyone other than himself, and he's convinced this is going to work. But my beef still comes to this. There are senators that need to stand up and say something on the Republican side. There are Senate leadership that needs to step up and put an end to this, because this is real pain. Look, we saw it. It's those miners. Today we laid off 170 infectious disease experts at the Minnesota Department of Health. We have warnings that our low-income heating program is going to be rescinded. The entire agency in the federal government that gets those checks out for low-income heating assistance are gone. We don't know who's going to send the checks. It snowed today in Minnesota, and those are the things that are gone. So we're making it very clear. This is not about government employees. It's not about some fake efficiencies. We're all for that, trying to. This is about real people and the impact, and this is going to do real damage.
You talked about that buyer's remorse. Let me ask you about Wisconsin last night. You know, you had this. You were in Wisconsin ahead of this race. Susan Crawford, who was sort of endorsed by progressive, center-left Democratic Party. It's a nonpartisan race, but she won by 10 points against the Trump-backed candidate. You said that to give you a little boost, you'd put the Apple ticker with the Tesla stock on your phone. And this really, Elon Musk got very upset about this. He genuinely seemed like emotional in an interview about this. I want to just play. He just really got in his feelings about this. I want to play this for you and get your response.
You had Tim Walz, who's a huge jerk, running around on stage with the Tesla stock price where the stock price had gone in half, and he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do! What a creep. What a jerk. Like, who derives joy from that?
Are you a creep and a jerk?
Well, that's a badge of honor if he thinks I am. Look, it's not personal with him. Oh, it's a little bit personal. I don't want to be disingenuous. The guy does bother me. It's a little bit personal. But look, my beef on this is that this guy is out there crying about his portfolio and about stock while I'm making, a comment. And my mom's Social Security check this month is late. That he's attacking the portfolios of working Minnesotans and working Americans who've paid into these programs that he calls a Ponzi scheme. He's taking it and laughing with his chainsaw about destroying the lives and undermining things and institutions that make life better for Minnesotans. Of course, he doesn't care about these agencies because he has all this money. Can you imagine being the richest man in the world and taking offense that I said something about Tesla stock? Look, if I'm Donald Trump won Wisconsin. I'll give him that. But he's sharing his presidency in the White House and who knows what else with this guy who's a loser, who lost. This guy's really bad at this. He made the case that everything hinged on this. And I just want to give a shout out to the folks in Wisconsin, to Ben Wickler, to, of course, Justice-elect Crawford, and to the people of Wisconsin who you said this right, Chris. This was a referendum on, does democracy stand, or does oligarchy and a king make the difference? And this was a referendum on Elon Musk and, by extension, by Donald Trump. A 10-point win in Wisconsin is an absolute massacre. Remember, this was a 1-point race in November. So I am angry with this guy. I'm glad he's irritated with me. He's a bully. He's picking on people that can't speak up. He's undermining the basic tenets of this country, all so that he can, an unelected oligarch run things. It's outrageous. And look, if Donald Trump wants to continue to hang around with him, I certainly think the DNC should think about hiring Elon Musk and send him to every race that we're in, because we will win. We will win.
Well, today we got this news, right? There's all this sort of whispering behind the scenes that Musk is going to go back to the private sector. He's going to leave the White House. This is NBC News. Trump told the cabinet members he'll leave his government role in the coming months. To your point about that, I mean, there was a race last night. There were 2 statewide races. There was a superintendent of educational instruction statewide race. Again, like the judicial race, nonpartisan. The Democrat won that by 5 points. The Musk race, the one where he's donning the cheese head and handing out the novelty checks and all eyes on me, he's the front face of it. It looks like he cost him 5 points. 5 points is a lot. Like, that's actually an impressive amount that you have repelled voters single-handedly. I haven't seen that really before.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's his toxic personality to begin with, but it's what you said was, and this is what's encouraging to me. This is what the big thing. Look, this judge didn't want to be in a partisan race. You can tell that Judge Crawford is not one of those people. This is about rule of law, but she had to because of that they made this the referendum, and it was very clear that as he thrust himself into the middle of this, it made a difference. But you're absolutely right, and I do think that race for state superintendent with Superintendent Underly, that's a big deal because her opponent was a Moms for Liberty person. So this was an attack on the idea of public schools, an attack and, advocating vouchers, book bans, things like that. So Wisconsin, the pinnacle swing state, did swing, and it swung hard in a direction of defending democracy, defending public schools, defending the rule of law. That should be encouraging. And I think the thing I have been saying, and the reason I'm out there, I'm doing these town halls, whether it's from Texas to Nebraska to Wisconsin, because those members of Congress are rightfully afraid to go and defend this because they knew that this was going to be the result, and now they're going to be tied to it. And so I think, the folks who came out, certainly Senator Booker inspired all of us and got out there. It feels like the Democratic Party has shook off the cobwebs and is back out there. And I don't say that just so we can win elections. That means the protection of Social Security is a priority. That means the rule of law is a priority. That means you can't just grab someone off the streets. My God, our graduate students, we had a student taken from Minnesota State University, Mankato, where I did my graduate work. That person was swept up, and I'm talking to Homeland Security trying to get information on them. Look, we have to, as Americans, acknowledge it doesn't matter if you're in this country and these people are here legally, that they have due process. And I think last night's vote was much bigger. That's the one thing Elon Musk got right, that this was a referendum on rule of law, a referendum on the Trump presidency, and Wisconsin. I hope they know it. I rarely talk good about Wisconsin embarrassing because the Packer Viking thing, but I am talking good about Wisconsin. They knew the assignment and they did it.
We'll see how long that lasts. We got a little while to go till football season. Governor Tim Walz, thank you so much for making time tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
Last week, President Trump attended a Women's History Month event. I know you thought that wasn't allowed anymore. But there was Donald Trump hosting a women's history event at the White House. At this event, he displayed his well-known knack for speaking about women in a totally normal and non-creepy way. He said, quote, "We're going to have tremendous, tremendous goodies in the bag for women, too. The women, between the fertilization and all of the other things that we're talking about, it's going to be great. Fertilization. I'm still very proud of it. I don't care. I'll be known as the fertilization president, and that's okay. That's not bad. That's not bad. I've been called much worse. Actually, I like it, right? I like it. Thank you. I'll be known as the fertilization president." We think he's referring to IVF treatments, which he promised as a candidate would be free if he got elected, after other Republicans were supporting banning IVF. Anyway, well, how's that going? Headline, CDC's IVF team gutted, even as Trump calls himself the fertilization president. Quote, "A team that tracked how well in vitro fertilization worked across the U.S. was abruptly cut Tuesday as part of the sweeping layoffs at the Department of Health and Human Services." One team member telling NBC News, quote, "It's surprising to me. President Trump said he was the fertility president. How does cutting this program support that?" The Trump administration has given out zero information on the 10,000 people it fired yesterday from federal health organizations. And so we're only now starting to piece together the scale of the carnage as these 10,000 fired government workers start to speak up and talk to the press or post to social media about what has happened inside their agencies and what jobs they were fired from. I mean, this is just a sampling. At the FDA, quote, "Offices focused on food, drug, and medical device policy were hit with deep staff reductions." At the CDC, fired employees included those studying injuries, asthma, lead poisoning, smoking, and radiation damage, as well as those that assess the health effects of extreme heat and wildfires. HIV prevention was a big target, including teams leading HIV surveillance and research, and a group of health researchers who were working on preventing transmission of HIV from mother to child. The AP says, quote, "Scores of government employees who help administer the early childhood program Head Start have been put on leave. Preschool operators say they have received no communication from the Office of Head Start and don't know who to turn to." NBC News reports that several divisions at HHS focused on the safety of people who work in mining. Those divisions were cut entirely. The whole office that administers LIHEAP, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, that whole office is gone. That's a program that literally keeps the heat on in millions of American homes through the winter. They just zeroed it out. From NPR, quote, "HHS layoffs hit Meals on Wheels and other services for seniors and disabled people. At least 40% of staff in those areas fired." Wired magazine reports that the CDC's vessel sanitation program has been eliminated. It, quote, "helps the cruise industry prevent public health issues, inspects cruises, and provides information on outbreaks." Let's definitely get rid of that. Also gone, the branch of our government that works to eliminate childhood lead poisoning. Like I said, we are piecing this together from what we can discern from the firings, oftentimes from what we hear from the people themselves who have been fired. What we are piecing together appears to be a portrait of pretty total destruction of the most advanced scientific and health institutions in the entire world. Dr. David Kessler has led prestigious medical schools. He is known and beloved for his landmark work on HIV and AIDS, for taking on the tobacco industry. He was the longtime commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. During COVID, here on this show in particular, you may remember, he became a familiar, even reassuring voice during a very deeply scary time. Now, with what appears to be the wholesale gutting of the country's health infrastructure currently underway and as yet poorly understood, there's only one person I really wanted to talk to. Joining us now is Dr. David Kessler, former FDA commissioner, former chief science officer for the Biden administration's COVID-19 response. Dr. Kessler, it's really nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
What's your reaction to what we know thus far of these cuts?
I think they're endangering the lives of all Americans. You alluded to it. Those nights during COVID that you had me on, I mean, there were some dark nights. Deaths, 3,000, 4,000. You even mentioned one of those nights. You were on the ledge, right? My job, I was able to walk you back a little.
Yeah.
I was able to say, we were able to say, it's going to be okay. The reason I was able to do that, because we had people like Peter Marks, Julie Turney. We had people who had expertise that allowed us to get through this, the right drugs, the right vaccines, the right doses. They were fired. We are less safe today because of these cuts that have happened the last several days. I always thought that things were fixable, right? You could fix things. I am very concerned that if these cuts are not rescinded, these will have effect for decades.
You think that the way they have done these cuts, the people they've cut, the number of jobs they've cut, potentially have created a crisis in which we can't ever have these institutions back at strength?
I think we're very close to that. I wonder whether the president really even knows, the extent of what has been done. Remember that night that he was taken by helicopter to Walter Reed? He was having difficulty breathing. He had COVID. He was very sick, right? He was given 2 monoclonal antibodies, right? He referenced those as miracles. They were cures. All of a sudden, he got better. I mean, he could have died, but for those drugs. Dr. Peter Stein's office made available those drugs to the president and to thousands of others. Peter Stein was fired, was let go. I don't think the president knows that. Someone needs to walk into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, we just fired the person who may have saved your life.
From what you know of, part of the difficulty of covering this story is that it is hard to understand the scale of what's happened and to contextualize it to understand, A, because nothing like this has ever happened before, but also because there's been no announcement of what they have done other than this sort of pablum from the HHS secretary, forgive me, where he's talking about the revolution has begun and all of this other nonspecific stuff. From what you know of who has been fired and what offices have been dismantled, does it say anything to you about there being a strategy at work? Is this the wish list of some right-wing group that's always wanted to destroy U.S. health infrastructure? I mean, is there any pattern here that you can discern to what they've done?
It is devastating, but it is haphazard. It is thoughtless, and it is chaotic. I don't think they fully understand what they are done. Look, bad stuff is going to happen on their watch that they're going to have to deal with. And they're not going to be equipped to do that. That's what's going to happen. But we have to be careful, though. This is not just about FDA, or NIH or CDC. I mean, you see what's going on in the universities. We have to be very careful. I mean, the thing that has made, America great, that it's made America competitive, there's a lot of things. But the biomedical infrastructure, right, the advances, the reason we are able to live long and productive lives, right, are because of the investment, not because we're smarter today, but because of the investment we made 50, 75 years ago, and that's being destroyed. And it's across the board. We have to rescind these cuts. Enough is enough.
When you think about the kinds of things that are going to come over the transom to America's health officials now, the kinds of things that they're going to need to respond to that you say they will not have the people in place to respond to adequately, what kind of things are those? What are the things they're not foreseeing that they're going to need these people they've just fired? Probably
the 2 most knowledgeable people about bird flu, gone. People who look at the toxins that are in, in our food, those programs are gutted. The people who are going to just answer the phones, right, to make sure that the next emergency use of that drug, like the president got, they're not there to answer those calls anymore, to make that available to the average citizen, right? The president has to be informed of what the extent of these cuts are. And we have maybe a week, before this becomes beyond fixable.
David Kessler, former commissioner of the FDA, chief science officer for the Biden administration's COVID-19 response, and friend to this show in many ways. Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Alicia Menendez, and it is a very big week in politics, with Americans quite possibly waking up to the havoc being wrought by President Trump and Elon Musk. With Republicans losing a big race in Wisconsin, despite Musk pouring more than $20 million into the race, and with closer than expected results in 2 special elections in ruby red Florida congressional districts. All of that, Senator Cory Booker struck a chord with his marathon speech on the Senate floor. We watched it together, firing up a Democratic base that is desperately seeking fighters. But we begin tonight with President Trump putting the world's economic system at risk with a tariff announcement that is deeply unpopular, even among Republicans.
We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first.
Joining me now, Senator Adam Schiff of California. Senator, as we come on air, the Dow's future down 1,000 points. We were told by the president it was Liberation Day. Are you feeling liberated?
No, I may be liberated from anything in a 401k, as millions of Americans will feel that impact, and will be liberated from any chance of having lower prices for things. This is going to be a disaster for our economy. It's going to be a disaster for hardworking families that are going to have to pay more for auto parts or getting their car fixed or, buying groceries or anything else. These other countries, many of whom are our closest allies, are going to retaliate against us. It's just simply going to escalate from here. I talked to farmers out in California who still haven't recovered the market share they lost during the first Trump administration from the ill-fated tariffs then. So this is going to be really disastrous. A massive self-inflicted wound on our economy from a president who campaigned on lowering prices, but is in fact pushing them through the roof.
Senator, you are not the only senator who's been speaking with farmers in your home state. And lest anyone think that these are just Democratic talking points, I want you to take a listen to Senator Tom Tillis talking about what Trump's tariffs are going to mean for farmers in his state of North Carolina.
Anyone who says there may be a little bit of pain before we get things right need to talk about farmers who are one crop away from bankruptcy. They don't have time, so we've got to be crisp on this implementation. Otherwise, we could do damage that's irreparable to farmers.
Crisp on the implementation is one thing. What else are you hearing from your Republican colleagues, their concerns about these tariffs?
Oh, I think their concerns are profound, not just with how much pain is going to be inflicted on their constituents, but what it's going to mean for them politically. We may have a vote shortly by Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, that will give Congress a chance to push back against some of these tariffs, particularly those targeting our Canadian neighbors. And I think many of the Republicans are inclined to support it. We'll see how many are actually willing to put their votes where their private comments are. But I think that this is a broadly held view. Certainly, as we've seen before, a lot of Republicans are simply going to fall in line. But with the pain that's going to be resulting from this, they're going to hear an earful from their constituents. It's why so many Republicans are being told, don't have town halls, because people are really unhappy with what they're doing.
Senator, you referenced Donald Trump campaigning on lower prices, and that was certainly one piece of his pitch to voters. He also pitched voters on this idea that America wasn't safe. And so it is striking to me that he has accomplished neither bringing costs down nor actually making this country safer. If anything, to the contrary, his administration has imperiled national security. We're now learning this about Signalgate. It is from Politico that you had National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's team regularly setting up chats on Signal to coordinate official work on issues that included Ukraine, China, Gaza, the Middle East, Africa, Europe. That is according to 4 people who've been personally added to Signal chats. 2 of the people said they have direct knowledge of at least 20 such chats. All 4 said they saw instances of sensitive information being discussed. So, Senator, it was not simply them talking about Yemen, which is dangerous. It was 20 other concurrent chats.
It really is mind-blowing that they were so reckless with our national security to engage in these kind of conversations, many of them using apparently their personal phones, but regardless using a commercial app. We have some very sophisticated adversaries, probably no one as sophisticated in terms of hacking as China. It is hard for me to believe, given the breadth of people that were included just on that Houthi chat, that China hasn't penetrated some of these phones, which means that whatever these conversations were that were going on, China may now be privy to. We have to assume, and I say this as the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, you have to assume that all of these conversations have been compromised. Now, maybe some of them haven't, but in order to, protect sources and methods, you have to assume the worst, which means that they're going to have to now, if they're doing their jobs, do the painstaking work of going through every source that might have been revealed from these reckless conversations on a commercial app. And what makes this even more adding insult to injury is this was the crowd that relentlessly hounded Hillary Clinton over her emails, when what we're seeing here is so far worse than anything that they were complaining about back then. The scope of this, we still don't fully understand.